In a small, peaceful town surrounded by lush green hills and winding roads, life moved at a slow pace. People knew each other's names, shared stories over cups of tea, and supported one another through thick and thin. But for 16-year-old Clara, the world had turned upside down. Her father, Daniel, a cheerful man with calloused hands from years of fixing cars, was no longer there to greet her with his warm smile or tell her silly jokes that made her laugh until her stomach hurt. Daniel wasn't just Clara's dad. He was her best friend. Every Saturday morning, they would take long walks together, stopping at the park where he'd teach her how to skip stones across the pond. On rainy afternoons, they'd sit in his workshop, tinkering with old bicycles or building birdhouses out of scrap wood. He always said, "Clara, if you can fix something broken, you'll never run out of purpose." Those words stayed with her, even now when she felt like her own heart was shattered into pieces. The accident happened on a Tuesday evening, the kind of night when everything seemed normal. Daniel had gone out to buy groceries, promising to bring back ice cream for dessert. But he never came home. A speeding truck lost control on a slick road, colliding with his car before anyone could react. By the time paramedics arrived, it was too late. The news hit Clara like a punch to the chest. One moment, her father was alive, laughing, and full of energy. And the next, he was gone. For days, Clara wandered through the house in a daze. She avoided looking at his chair in the living room, where he used to sit while reading the newspaper. She couldn't bear to step into his workshop, where tools lay untouched, gathering dust. Even the smell of motor oil, which once reminded her of happy times, now brought tears streaming down her face. Her mother tried to comfort her, but grief weighed heavily on both of them, making conversations feel hollow and strained. Finally, the day of the funeral arrived. Friends and neighbors gathered at the local funeral home, filling the cozy space with quiet murmurs and somber faces. Flowers lined the walls, their sweet fragrance masking the sadness in the air. Clara stood apart from the crowd, feeling like an outsider in her own life. Everyone else seemed to know what to say or do, but she felt completely lost. How could she say goodbye to someone who meant everything to her? As people filed past the open casket to pay their respects, Clara hung back, frozen in place. She hadn't seen her father since the accident and wasn't sure she wanted to. What if he didn't look like himself? What if seeing him lying there made everything feel even more real? But as the line grew shorter and the room quieter, she realized she couldn't keep running away. Taking a shaky breath, she forced herself to move forward, one step at a time. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached the casket. For a moment, she hesitated, staring at the polished wood. Then, summoning all her courage, she looked inside, and the sight took her breath away. There he was, her father, dressed in his favorite suit, his hands folded gently over his chest. His face was pale, yes, but peaceful, almost as if he were simply sleeping. Clara's knees buckled, and she clutched the edge of the casket to steady herself. Tears blurred her vision as she leaned closer, overwhelmed by a mix of love, pain, and disbelief. She wanted to scream, to beg him to wake up, to tell him how much she needed him. Instead, she did the only thing she could think of. She reached out and hugged him tightly, pressing her cheek against his cold one. In that moment, she didn't care what anyone thought. All she cared about was holding on to him, even if it was for the last time. Clara's embrace lingered, her arms wrapped tightly around her father's still form. The fabric of his suit felt stiff and unfamiliar beneath her fingers, but she didn't let go. She whispered into his ear, her voice trembling with emotion. "Dad, I love you so much. Please don't leave me." Her words hung in the air, unmet by a response. But as she held him, something strange began to happen, something that would change everything. At first, it was barely noticeable. A faint warmth spread through her hands where they touched his arm. It wasn't the cold stiffness she had expected. Instead, it felt almost alive. Clara froze, unsure if she was imagining things. Grief could play tricks on the mind, couldn't it? She pulled back slightly, her eyes scanning his face for any sign of movement. His expression remained peaceful, unchanged. Yet the warmth persisted, growing stronger with each passing second. Then, just as she was about to convince herself it was all in her head, she heard it, a soft, familiar voice. Not loud enough for anyone else to notice, but clear as day inside her mind. "Clara," it said gently, "it's okay. I'm here with you." Her breath caught in her throat. Her heart raced as she stared at her father's motionless body, searching for some explanation. Was this real? Had she finally lost her grip on reality? Or was this some kind of miracle? The room seemed to blur around her, the murmurs of distant conversations fading into silence. All she could focus on was the sound of his voice, soothing and steady, like a warm blanket wrapping around her soul. "Dad?" she whispered hesitantly, her voice barely audible. There was no reply, but the warmth remained, radiating from his body and filling her with a sense of calm she hadn't felt since the accident. Slowly, reluctantly, she released her hold and stepped back, her legs shaky beneath her. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of awe, confusion, and hope. The moment passed as quickly as it had come. The warmth faded, leaving behind only the chill of the funeral home. Clara blinked, trying to make sense of what had just happened. She glanced around the room, half expecting someone to have noticed the strange occurrence. But no one was paying attention. Friends and family stood in small clusters, chatting quietly or wiping their eyes. To them, nothing unusual had taken place. Clara turned her gaze back to her father, studying his serene face. He looked exactly as he had moments before, still, silent, lifeless. And yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary had occurred. That brief moment of connection had been more real than anything she'd experienced since his death. It was as though he had reached out to her, bridging the gap between life and whatever lay beyond. Her mind raced with questions. Was this a trick of her imagination? A desperate attempt by her subconscious to cope with the pain of loss? Or was it possible, just possible, that her father's spirit was still near, watching over her in ways she couldn't fully understand? As she stood there, staring at his casket, Clara felt a strange mixture of emotions swirling inside her. Sadness was still there, of course, but it was accompanied by something new: wonder. For the first time since the accident, she allowed herself to entertain the idea that maybe, just maybe, death wasn't the end. Maybe her father wasn't truly gone after all. With shaking hands, she reached out once more, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Though the warmth was gone, the memory of it lingered, imprinted on her heart. As she took a step back, she made a silent promise to herself to stay open to whatever might come next. Because if there was even the slightest chance that her father was still with her, she wasn't going to let fear or doubt stand in the way of finding out. That night, Clara lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as her mind replayed the events of the day. The warmth she had felt, the voice she had heard, it all seemed so vivid, so real. Yet every time she tried to explain it logically, doubts crept in. Was it grief playing tricks on her? Or was there something more, something beyond the boundaries of what she understood about life and death? Sleep eluded her. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside her window, made her heart race. She kept thinking about her father's voice, the way it had sounded so clear, so familiar. It wasn't like the memories she carried in her mind. This had felt alive, present, as if he were right there with her. The thought both comforted and terrified her. The next morning, Clara woke up exhausted but restless. Her mother was already in the kitchen, sipping coffee and staring blankly at the wall. Clara wanted to tell her what had happened at the funeral home, but the words stuck in her throat. How could she explain something she didn't even understand herself? Instead, she mumbled a quiet good morning and poured herself a glass of water, avoiding eye contact. As the days passed, strange things began to happen around the house. At first, they were subtle, a book falling off the shelf when no one was near, a faint breeze brushing against her cheek despite closed windows. Clara dismissed them as coincidences, her tired brain overreacting to ordinary occurrences. But then, the signs grew harder to ignore. One evening, while sorting through her father's belongings in the garage, Clara came across an old toolbox he used to carry everywhere. She opened it carefully, half expecting to find nothing but rusty tools and spare screws. But nestled inside was a small, folded piece of paper. Curious, she picked it up and unfolded it. It was a note written in her father's unmistakable scrawl. "Clara, always remember, you're stronger than you think." Her hands trembled as she read the words over and over again. This couldn't be a coincidence. She remembered that phrase. It was something her father used to say whenever she doubted herself. He'd repeat it before school exams, during bike rides when she struggled to keep up, or any time she felt overwhelmed. Seeing it now, written in his handwriting, sent chills down her spine. Determined to test whether these occurrences were truly connected to her father, Clara decided to try speaking aloud, to see if he would respond. Late that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, she sat cross-legged on the floor of her room, clutching one of his old flannel shirts. Taking a deep breath, she whispered, "Dad, are you really here?" For a moment, nothing happened. The silence pressed heavily on her ears, and she started to feel silly for even trying. Just as she was about to give up, a soft knock echoed through the room. Startled, Clara glanced toward the door, but it was firmly shut. Then another knock, this time louder, came from the direction of her desk. Her pulse quickened as she turned to see a pen rolling slowly across the surface, stopping just at the edge. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized this wasn't random. Someone, or something, was responding. Encouraged, she asked another question. "If you're here, Dad, can you show me something else?" Almost instantly, the lamp on her bedside table flickered twice, casting shadows that danced eerily along the walls. It wasn't enough to convince anyone else, but for Clara, it was proof enough. Each interaction left her with a mix of emotions: relief, excitement, and a lingering sadness. Relief because she knew her father hadn't abandoned her completely. Excitement because she finally had a way to connect with him, however mysterious it might be. And sadness because, despite these moments, he was still gone. She couldn't hug him, laugh with him, or share her everyday struggles the way she used to. Still, Clara found herself looking forward to these fleeting encounters. They became a lifeline, pulling her back from the depths of despair. With each sign, each whispered word, she felt closer to understanding that love didn't end with death. If anything, it transformed into something deeper, something unbreakable. And though she couldn't fully grasp how or why, Clara knew one thing for certain: her father was still watching over her, guiding her through the darkness in ways she never imagined possible. Clara's newfound connection with her father became the driving force behind her days. Every morning, she woke up with a mix of anticipation and curiosity, wondering how, or if, he would reach out to her again. The signs were unpredictable, sometimes subtle, and other times impossible to ignore. A misplaced photo turning up in an unexpected place. The faint smell of motor oil lingering in the air when no one had been near his tools. Even the way sunlight streamed through her window at just the right angle, casting shadows that seemed to form shapes resembling his smile. Each moment felt like a message, a reminder that he was still with her. But Clara wanted more. She craved answers, explanations for what was happening, and why. Was this some kind of spiritual phenomenon, or was it unique to her bond with her father? Determined to uncover the truth, she began digging deeper into his past, hoping to find clues that might shed light on the strange events unfolding around her. Her search led her to the attic, a dusty, forgotten space filled with boxes of old belongings. It was a treasure trove of memories. Faded photographs, childhood toys, and stacks of yellowed papers tied neatly with string. As she sifted through the items, one box caught her attention. It was labeled Daniel's Things in her mother's handwriting. Her heart raced as she opened it, revealing a collection of letters, journals, and trinkets that had belonged to her father before she was born. Inside, she found a stack of handwritten letters addressed to someone named Margaret, a name she didn't recognize. Intrigued, she unfolded the first letter and began reading. The words transported her back in time, offering a glimpse into her father's younger years. In the letters, he spoke candidly about moments of doubt, struggles with loss, and encounters that defied logic. One passage stood out. "I know people won't believe me, but I felt their presence, the ones who've moved on. They don't speak in voices we can hear, not always. Sometimes it's a feeling, a touch, or even a dream so vivid it feels real. I think they're trying to tell us something. That love doesn't die, no matter where we go." Clara's hands trembled as she read the words over and over again. Could this be why she was experiencing these things now? Had her father known all along that such connections were possible? The realization hit her like a wave, filling her with both awe and questions. If her father had experienced something similar, why hadn't he ever told her? She continued exploring the contents of the box, finding more fragments of his story. Among the items was a small leather journal, its pages worn from frequent use. Flipping through it, she discovered entries detailing moments when he swore he'd sensed his own loved ones after they had passed, his grandmother appearing in dreams to offer advice, a childhood friend guiding him toward safety during a storm. Each entry was written with a sense of wonder, as though he viewed these experiences not as tragedies but as gifts. By the time Clara closed the journal, tears streamed down her face. For years, she had thought of her father as strong, practical, and grounded. But now she saw another side of him, a man who believed in mysteries beyond the physical world, who embraced the unknown with open arms. This revelation changed everything. It wasn't just about understanding the signs anymore. It was about honoring the legacy he had left behind. The idea that love transcended life itself. That night, Clara sat alone in her room, clutching the journal close to her chest. She whispered softly, "Dad, is this what you wanted me to find? Are you trying to teach me something?" Almost immediately, the lamp beside her flickered twice, a signal she had come to recognize as his way of saying yes. Smiling through her tears, she nodded. "Okay, Dad. I'll keep looking. I'll figure it out." With renewed determination, Clara vowed to piece together the rest of the puzzle. She didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was clear. Her father's spirit was guiding her, step by step, toward a deeper understanding of life, loss, and the unbreakable bonds of love. Clara's journey of discovery took her deeper into her father's world, both past and present. Armed with the letters and journals she had found in the attic, she began piecing together fragments of his life, moments that revealed a side of him she had never fully understood. Each page brought her closer to unraveling the mystery of their connection, but it also raised new questions. Why had he kept these experiences hidden from her? And what did they mean for her own encounters now? One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Clara decided to visit her father's workshop. It was a place she had avoided since his passing, too overwhelmed by memories of their time together. But tonight felt different. The air carried a quiet calm, as if inviting her to step inside and confront the emotions she'd been running from. The workshop smelled faintly of motor oil and sawdust, just as it always had. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, and half-finished projects sat waiting to be completed, a birdhouse missing its roof, a bicycle tire propped against the wall. Clara ran her fingers over the workbench, tracing grooves worn smooth by years of use. She could almost picture her father standing there, humming a tune as he worked. "Dad," she said softly, breaking the silence, "I need your help." Her voice echoed slightly, but the room remained still. Taking a deep breath, she continued, "You've been showing me signs, but I don't understand them all yet. What are you trying to tell me?" For several moments, nothing happened. Just as doubt began creeping in, a gentle breeze swept through the workshop, rustling papers on the table. Among them was an old photograph she hadn't noticed before, a faded image of her father as a young man, standing beside a woman who looked strikingly familiar. Margaret. The name from the letters came rushing back to her. Who was this woman, and why had her father written to her so often? Clara studied the photo closely, noticing how happy he looked. His arm was draped casually around Margaret's shoulders, and they both wore wide smiles. On the back of the photo, written in her father's neat handwriting, were the words, "Margaret, my guiding light." A shiver ran down Clara's spine. Guiding light. What did that mean? She placed the photo aside and reached for another stack of papers tucked beneath it. Inside, she found more notes, this time not letters, but sketches and diagrams. They depicted symbols and patterns she didn't recognize at first, but upon closer inspection, they seemed connected to the dreams she'd been having. Dreams where her father appeared, speaking in riddles about paths, connections, and bridges between worlds. Suddenly, it clicked. Her father wasn't just reaching out to comfort her. He was teaching her something. These symbols, these signs, they were part of a language, a way to communicate across the veil separating life and death. He wanted her to learn it, to understand that their bond transcended physical boundaries. With newfound clarity, Clara began experimenting. Every night, she returned to the workshop, sitting among his tools and belongings, asking questions aloud and observing the responses. Sometimes, objects moved slightly, a wrench shifting position or a hammer falling gently onto the floor. Other times, lights flickered in specific sequences, almost like Morse code. Each sign grew clearer, more deliberate, as though her father was patiently guiding her toward mastery. Through these exchanges, Clara realized something profound. Her father's presence wasn't just about comforting her grief, it was about empowering her. He wanted her to see that love, like energy, couldn't be destroyed. It transformed, adapted, and found new ways to exist. By learning to interpret his messages, she was honoring not only his memory, but also the lessons he had tried to teach her throughout his life. By the end of the week, Clara felt a shift within herself. The weight of her loss hadn't disappeared, but it no longer crushed her. Instead, it became a source of strength, a reminder that her father's love was eternal, woven into every moment of her life. And though she knew their communication might fade with time, she held on to the belief that he would always find ways to guide her, whether through whispers in the wind or subtle nudges along her path. As Clara grew more confident in her ability to communicate with her father, she began to see their connection as less of a mystery and more of a partnership. Each night, she returned to the workshop, sitting amidst his tools and mementos, eager to learn whatever he was trying to teach her. The flickering lights, moving objects, and faint breezes no longer startled her. They were signs she had come to trust, messages written in a language only they understood. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the workshop windows, Clara decided to test the limits of their bond. She brought with her a photo album filled with memories of their adventures together, hiking trips, picnics by the lake, and lazy afternoons spent fixing bikes. Flipping through the pages, she paused at a picture of the two of them standing beside a half-built treehouse. Her father's arm was around her shoulders, and both of them were grinning from ear to ear. "Dad," she said softly, "do you remember this day? We worked so hard on that treehouse, but we never finished it. Why did we stop?" The room fell silent for a moment, and Clara wondered if she'd pushed too far. Then, slowly, the hammer resting on the workbench rolled forward, stopping just at the edge. She smiled, recognizing the answer immediately. It wasn't because they hadn't wanted to finish. It was because life had gotten busy. School projects, work deadlines, and other responsibilities had pulled them in different directions. But the memory of their unfinished project lingered, a reminder of how much they had cherished those moments together. Encouraged by the response, Clara kept asking questions, delving deeper into their shared past. Some answers came quickly, a wrench shifting position or a light blinking twice, while others required patience. One particularly emotional question left her breathless. "Dad, are you proud of me?" For what felt like an eternity, nothing happened. Clara's heart sank, wondering if she'd asked something too personal, too difficult for him to answer. Then, a soft gust of wind swept through the workshop, carrying with it the faint scent of motor oil, the unmistakable aroma of her father's presence. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "I'll take that as a yes." These nightly sessions became a source of healing for Clara. With each interaction, she felt herself growing stronger, more resilient. The sharp edges of her grief softened, replaced by a sense of purpose. She realized that her father wasn't just comforting her. He was encouraging her to move forward, to embrace life fully even in his absence. His guidance wasn't meant to hold her back. It was meant to propel her forward. But there was one question she couldn't bring herself to ask. When will I see you again? Deep down, she feared the answer might be never. So instead, she focused on smaller, more practical matters. She started volunteering at the community center where her father used to repair bikes for free, helping kids learn basic mechanics. At school, she threw herself into her studies, determined to make him proud. And at home, she helped her mother navigate the challenges of rebuilding their lives without him. Despite her progress, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something unresolved between them. It wasn't sadness or regret. It was more like anticipation, as though her father had one final message to share. On quiet nights, when the house was still and the world outside seemed to hold its breath, she would sit by her bedroom window, staring at the stars and whispering, "If there's more you want to tell me, Dad, I'm listening." And sometimes, just sometimes, she'd feel it, the faintest brush of warmth against her skin, like a ghostly hand resting on her shoulder. In those moments, she knew he was still with her, watching over her, guiding her. Their connection may have been unconventional, but it was real, and it gave her the strength to face each new day with courage and hope. Clara didn't know what the future held, but she was certain of one thing: her father's love would always be a part of her, lighting her way even in the darkest times. Months passed, and Clara's life began to take on a new rhythm. The sharp ache of her father's absence softened into a bittersweet warmth, like sunlight filtering through autumn leaves. She carried him with her everywhere, in the laughter she shared with friends, in the kindness she showed strangers, and in the quiet moments when she paused to remember his voice. Though the signs from him had grown less frequent, their impact lingered, shaping her in ways she hadn't expected. At school, Clara threw herself into her studies with a determination that surprised even her teachers. She excelled in subjects she once found challenging, fueled by the memory of her father's advice. "If you can fix something broken, you'll never run out of purpose." His words echoed in her mind whenever she faced a difficult problem, reminding her that perseverance could mend almost anything. Her grades improved, and for the first time, she started dreaming about the future, not with fear or uncertainty, but with hope. Her volunteer work at the community center became another cornerstone of her healing journey. Every Saturday morning, she helped kids learn how to repair bikes, just as her father had taught her. They laughed together, struggled over stubborn bolts, and celebrated small victories when wheels turned smoothly again. Watching their faces light up with pride reminded Clara of the joy her father had brought into her own life. It was her way of keeping his legacy alive, one repaired bike at a time. At home, Clara grew closer to her mother, who was navigating her own grief in quieter ways. Together, they sorted through old photo albums, sharing stories and memories of Daniel. Some nights, they sat side by side on the couch, sipping tea and talking late into the evening. Other times, they simply sat in companionable silence, each lost in their thoughts. Though sadness still lingered between them, it no longer felt suffocating. Instead, it was a shared burden, lighter because they carried it together. Yet, despite all the progress she'd made, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that her father's presence was fading. The flickering lights and gentle breezes that had once been so vivid now seemed distant, like echoes of a dream slipping away. She tried not to dwell on it, telling herself that maybe he had done what he set out to do. guide her through the hardest part of her grief. But deep down, she wondered if there was still more he wanted to say. One night, unable to sleep, Clara wandered into the workshop. The familiar scent of motor oil greeted her, comforting yet tinged with nostalgia. She sat down on the stool where her father used to sit, running her fingers over the smooth surface of the workbench. "Dad," she whispered, "if there's something else you need to tell me, I'm ready." For a long moment, nothing happened. Just as she was about to leave, a faint sound caught her attention, a soft tapping, almost like footsteps. She turned toward the source and saw a shadow moving across the floor, cast by the moonlight streaming through the window. It wasn't frightening. It felt reassuring, like a final goodbye wrapped in warmth. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized this might be it, their last interaction. "I miss you, Dad," she said softly. "But I'm okay now, I promise." As if in response, the air around her seemed to shimmer, filling the room with an inexplicable sense of peace. For the first time in months, Clara didn't feel the weight of unanswered questions pressing on her chest. Instead, she felt a deep certainty that her father's love would always be with her, guiding her silently, even when she couldn't see or hear him. The next morning, Clara woke up with a renewed sense of clarity. She knew the signs wouldn't stop entirely. They were too much a part of her now. But she also understood that she didn't need constant proof to believe in his presence. His love had become a part of her, woven into every decision she made, every smile she gave, every challenge she faced. And though she missed him fiercely, she was grateful for the lessons he had taught her, the bond they still shared, and the knowledge that love, like energy, could never truly disappear. It simply transformed, finding new ways to shine. Ask. Explain. On the anniversary of her father's passing, Clara woke up with a mix of emotions swirling inside her. It had been a year since the world had felt so heavy, yet she also felt lighter than she had in months. The sharp edges of her grief had softened, replaced by gratitude for the time they'd shared and the lessons he had left behind. Still, the day carried a weight she couldn't ignore, a need to honor him in a way that felt meaningful. After breakfast, Clara walked to the cemetery where her father was buried. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and wildflowers blooming along the path. She carried a single red rose in one hand and clutched the old photo album from his workshop in the other. Each step brought memories flooding back. The sound of his laugh, the feel of his calloused hands guiding hers as they worked together, the warmth of his hugs after a long day. When she reached his gravestone, she knelt down and placed the rose gently on the ground. The marble was cool beneath her fingertips as she traced the engraved letters of his name, Daniel Harper. For a moment, she simply sat there, letting the quiet surround her. Then, taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "Hey, Dad," she said softly, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "I miss you every day. But I want you to know, I'm okay. You taught me so much, not just about fixing things, but about being strong, about loving people, about finding light even in the darkest times. And I think I'd finally understand what you were trying to show me." She opened the photo album and flipped through its pages, showing him pictures of their adventures together. There was the treehouse they never finished, the bike rides through town, the silly faces they made during family dinners. "I didn't finish the treehouse," she admitted with a small smile, "but maybe someday I will. Just like you always said, there's no rush, right?" As she spoke, the wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves overhead and sending a gentle breeze swirling around her. It wasn't cold. It felt warm, almost like an embrace. Clara closed her eyes, letting the sensation wash over her. When she opened them again, she noticed something unusual, a faint shimmer in the air above the gravestone, like heat waves rising from pavement on a summer day. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized it might be him. One last sign, one final gift. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "For everything. I'll keep making you proud. I promise." In that moment, she felt it, the unmistakable presence of her father, wrapping around her like an invisible hug. It wasn't overwhelming or dramatic. It was calm, peaceful, and full of love. She knew this was likely their goodbye. For now, at least, but it didn't fill her with sadness. Instead, it filled her with hope. Hope that their bond would endure, no matter where life took her. When the breeze settled and the shimmer faded, Clara stood up, brushing dirt from her knees. She glanced at the gravestone one last time before turning to leave. As she walked away, she noticed something odd. A wrench lying near the base of the stone, glinting in the sunlight. It hadn't been there when she arrived. Picking it up, she recognized it instantly. It was one of her father's favorite tools, the one he always kept tucked in his belt loop. Clara smiled, clutching the wrench tightly in her hand. "You're still full of surprises, huh?" she murmured, shaking her head. Though she knew it was impossible for the wrench to have appeared out of thin air, she didn't question it. Some things, she decided, were better left unexplained. As she made her way back home, Clara felt a sense of peace settle over her. Her father's love hadn't disappeared. It had transformed, becoming a part of who she was. He was in the stories she told, the kindness she showed, the strength she found in moments of doubt. And though she couldn't see him or hear his voice anymore, she knew he was still with her. In the wind that brushed against her cheek, in the warmth of the sun on her skin, in the quiet certainty that love endures beyond death. That night, as she lay in bed, Clara held the wrench close to her chest. She whispered one last thing before drifting off to sleep. "I love you, Dad. Always." And somewhere, somehow, she knew he heard her.